We're going to use Ableton Live 12 stem separation feature to turn this bass into this. The point of the stem separation feature in Ableton Live 12 is to let us producers extract stems from finished tracks for remixing, things like the drums, bass, vocals, etc. I got one of my tracks here that I used the stem separation feature on to extract out the different sounds. So this is it before doing any of the extraction. And then you can see what's happened here. We've pulled out the vocals, drums, bass, and others, I guess, which is pretty cool. We've pulled out different features of the sound. The way that these stem separation tools work is by using an AI model that has been trained to understand the features of the different sounds, like the drums, bass, etc. That model identifies those features in the track that you're analyzing and extracts the different stems that match those characteristics. So, in theory, you can use the stem separation on any sound, even if it doesn't contain vocals, drums, etc. Like this bass. Huh? Brought it back around? Well, it turns out the theory does work. Otherwise, this would be a pointless video. And I'm trying not to make pointless videos. It's my resolution for 2026. So when we analyze that bass sound, we get those 4 different tracks: the vocals, drums, bass, and others. Again, this is using the AI model to determine what the different features of the sounds are, and it's kind of pulling them out even though they don't exist. So if we start with this drum clip, you'll notice it's pulled out like drum transients. Sound weird, but it's the rhythmic transients of the sound that it's sort of extracted. The bass is super interesting. It's pulled out something that sounds a bit more like an atmospheric synth to me. It's kind of sick. It's pretty cool. And then weirdly, considering that was bass, the others track starts out more like a bass and then turns into something completely different. What's so weird about the others one is that the original sound doesn't really change throughout the entire clip. So the differences in sounds from the beginning to the end are basically entirely AI generated, which is really strange. Anyway, I wanted to see what we could do with these stem artifacts. This channel is all about kind of experimental sound design, so I find it pretty compelling to use tools like this in ways that they weren't strictly supposed to be used. So I want to take this stuff and make kind of a wonky drum rack from it. Gone through the stems and I pulled out the interesting little clips of the different extractions that we've got here. I grabbed some normal sounding drum hits from the drum stems, some choppy bits from the bass stems, and some, I don't even know, hats maybe from the other stems. I shoved all of those sounds into a drum rack and then put together kind of a dubstep-like beat. Which sounds like shit, honestly. Ooh, okay, it's pretty grim. Pretty grim. Okay, so obviously this needs a ton of processing. I went one by one through every sound and processed it independently. I also gave them adorable names, which is a very important part of the sound design process. For the kick, I kind of bumped up the sub here, reduced a little bit the low mids, and just completely decimated the highs to give it a little bit more of a sound that sounded like a kick. Felt like that was lacking a little bit of character, so added in some saturation with some hard clipping, drive all the way up, output down a bit. Way cooler. This snare sound, I transposed all the way up, like 37 semitones, and then increased the presence around sort of, 484, so around 500 hertz-ish, so that we could get a bit of body for the snare. For the wispy boy, hat with a question mark, and chirper, I did about the same thing. I just chopped off a lot of the lows to get rid of some of the rumble. Didn't really feel like they needed much more. I thought they sound pretty cool. For the bass hit, or bass shit as I have written here, all I did was increase a little bit of presence up in the area. AI aria. Yeah, we're going to go with that because it was lacking a little bit of presence to cut through a mix. So just added a little bit of that. Aliens. I added just a ton of Valhalla reverb, Valhalla future verb, in fact, to make this sound like you are actually being abducted. Right? Then finally, Kinda Sick, named because it sounds kind of sick. Didn't do very much except reduce a bit of presence and added another big boy Valhalla reverb. Then finally, well, I guess almost finally, the most interesting bit of processing is with Whoa Nelly. I have done a little bit of basic EQing to get rid of some of the presence, but I'm using an LFO on the transposition of this sound so that it goes up and down over the course of 4 bars. Okay, then actually, finally, I added a saturator right at the end with a ton of drive, pulling it all the way down with some hard clipping, essentially just to glue the whole sound together. So with some stem separation, some AI modeling, and some audio mangling, we have turned this neuro bass into this madness.